of the first major
it is kind of
slashers.
a classic.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Mill of the Stone Women. And, in my opinion, overrated classic from 1960.
And you see this on a lot of lists of best horror movies and must-see horror movies. And
Yeah, if you get
was
like
o-
the
it was
50
okay.
best of all time, it's always like in the 30s somewhere. And
Yeah, it was all right.
all right, yeah.
Spoiler. Yeah.
And 2 documentaries. Boris Karloff, the man behind the monster. And, the longest title ever, Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, a history of folk horror.
Okay. And we got a short.
And we got a short. But before we get going on it, what do we got next week?
Ooh, I don't have that here in front of me. Oh, it's Scream Week.
Scream
That's
Week.
right. Yes, I remember. We don't need it.
We are going to watch Scream 1, Scream 2, Scream 3. Guess what next?
Scream 4.
And the new 2022 version of Scream, which is not Scream 5 for some reason.
And we're going to have a bonus of Scream Blackula Scream.
The bonus newsletter on Saturday will have Scream Blackula Scream.
The sequel to Blackula.
And also the Screaming Skull. So we've got
right.
all kinds of screaming going on next week. Plus, you can scream too, because if you are on the HorrorBulletin.com newsletter list, you may win one of our many copies of the 2022 Scream that we're going to be giving away sometime after next weekend.
They were nice enough to give us some codes to promote it.
Yeah, we have Scream codes.
Yeah, Scream codes for you.
And we've actually got some leftover codes.
And we actually have not seen that one yet.
We're
ourselves.
Gonna see it
we're
today.
we're going to see it, yeah. But as of this recording, it's a surprise for us too.
And we have some leftover gift codes that are unclaimed from previous prize winners that didn't get back with us. So
we have some physical St. Maud DVDs yet, don't we too? Yes.
And we've got some of the Deep House and House on the Bayou still. I need to check and see if those have expired. If not, check your emails this next Sunday. That would be, I don't know what day that's going to be, but in about 10 days from today. Check your emails, and you may well win something.
Yeah, sign up.
So be sure to check your emails. It'll be coming from email@horrorguys.com. Make sure we're in your white list.
It's like buying a lottery ticket. You're much more likely to win if you enter.
Yeah,
sign up.
And all
Sign
you have
up.
to do is be on our
mailing
weekly
list.
newsletter list. Yeah. All right. So are you ready to start?
I'm ready.
All right. Where are we going first?
Let's go with Boris Karloff, the man behind the monster.
Boris Karloff.
This was a 2021 documentary.
I saw a list the other day of the actors who have died the most times in the films.
He's up there, isn't
You'd
he?
expect like Sean Bean or somebody, but he wasn't even on the list.
Not in the top 10.
Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, they're on the list.
Vincent Price was one of them on the list,
He
too.
beat both of them. Yeah, he was ahead of both of them there. Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to start off Boris Karloff, the man behind the monster from 2021.
And there's no spoiler-free judgment zone on this because it's a
He dies at
documentary.
the end. Yeah,
it's a
we
documentary
know how Boris
about Boris
Karloff
Karloff.
goes.
Yeah, he did stuff, and yeah,
Yeah, he made movies. He got old, and
he's no longer with us, sadly. Yeah.
Directed by Thomas Hamilton, written by him and also Ron McCloskey, stars Guillermo del Toro, Ron Perlman, Christopher Plummer, and a whole bunch of other people that are interviewed. They're not really starring in it.
Yeah,
I like how Christopher Plummer makes third billing, and he gets like 30 seconds at the very end.
I wouldn't really call it starring. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we
But he
interviewed this
chimes
guy,
in.
too.
Yeah.
1 hour, 39 minutes, and there's a trailer in the show notes that you can watch. And this was it's on Shudder, if you want to take a look at that one. What'd you think?
I thought it was kind of interesting, but I didn't feel like I learned a lot that I didn't already know. But we're horror buffs, and we've seen this stuff and read this stuff before. If you're not familiar with Karloff at all, his history, this would be very informative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought it was cool, the interviews with people that actually knew him and worked with him, and his daughter, and the reflections of people that actually knew him.
Yeah.
I thought that was nice.
Definitely entertaining.
Yeah.
I don't know how educational it was for me either, but it was
But it's a pretty
time
much
well spent.
straightforward documentary, standard documentary format.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, when asked about his breakout role, people always expected Karloff to talk about Frankenstein. But he always considered his breakout role to be The Criminal Code from 1930. I've never seen it.
I have not either.
I can't say I'd ever heard of it.
But they show clips of these various movies, too.
He's interesting looking in that. He looks like a a character, that's for sure.
Yeah.
This documentary contains a huge number of interviews with people who worked with Karloff over his 60-year-long career, as well as reflections from his daughter, who is still alive, we checked. It obviously starts off explaining how Frankenstein was originally planned to be a vehicle for Bela Lugosi, Universal's big up-and-coming megastar. Old Bela wasn't too thrilled with non-speaking roles, and James Whale didn't really want him anyway. So Whale decided to go with Karloff instead, after seeing him in that Criminal Code movie. Karloff and Whale then worked again on The Old Dark House from 1932. And of course, we have reviewed all these movies previously somewhere on the site. You can search for it. Not long after, he became an actual star in The Mask of Fu Manchu from 1932.
And talk about a politically incorrect movie for today.
That wouldn't fly today.
Oh, yeah. So anti-Asian, and he's in yellowface, and yeah.
The yellowface alone would
white
get
actors
canceled today.
The supporting cast, a bunch of white actors in yellowface. And,
yeah, I don't know if there were any actual Asians in that movie.
Yeah, there might have been some, but not, few. Yeah.
And then, of course, he did The Mummy in 1932. At that point, he pretty much became a household name. Yeah, they stopped putting his full name on the posters. He's not Boris Karloff. He's just
Karloff.
Karloff, or Karloff the Great, or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, Karloff. You know who we mean. From there, the documentary steers into his childhood of young William Henry Pratt.
Who?
That's I don't know. If I was going to come up with a stage name, a pseudonym, Boris Karloff.
That's pretty awesome.
Why would you come up with that?
Oh, it's cool, though. I mean, it sounds cool now, but where did he pull that from? You wonder.
His mixed-race ethnicity and family legal issues were an ongoing theme in his youth. Did you know he was half Indian?
I did.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, I knew that.
He does have a sort of look to him like that.
A little
I never
bit.
really put two and two together.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was just pure British.
Yeah, his father was Indian, his mother was a British. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his brother was an accused murderer, which
All
put
kinds of-
shame all over the family forever.
Yeah.
Well, he was very poor in his youth, but eventually fell in love with the theater. He then got numerous small parts in the teens and early 1920s. There was a lot of throwaway films that were cranked out very quickly and forgotten. Yeah, he did a whole bunch of things long before Frankenstein, and no one's ever seen them. At one point, he quit the theater and movies and went back into construction work, which caused some lifelong back issues.
And you kind of wonder about those old throwaway films. I mean, like now, everything, you put it on the internet and it's there forever. There's probably still lost films, but, not like back then.
No.
And you wonder about, were any of these any good? No, we'll never know.
Well, imagine if they were really good, somebody would have saved them.
Yeah.
Well,
but,
I mean, lost films do happen.
yeah.
But I mean, somebody we'd have heard, like the Lon Chaney one, London After Dark.
Mm-hmm.
It's been gone forever, but he looks so cool. Everybody really wishes that movie was still around. You've heard of it at least.
Yeah.
You've seen pictures of it at least.
But only the stills survive.
Yeah, these old Karloff films, I think no one cared.
Yeah.
They were bad.
Experimental and early work, and yeah.
Like indie films today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're entertaining for an hour, and then you forget all about
Not
them.
worth keeping, yeah.
So Karloff was instrumental in helping to found the Screen Actors Guild, the SAG, partly due to conflicts he endured during shooting Frankenstein and The Mummy. I guess his director there, did James Whale do the Mummy also? I think he did.
I think he did, yeah.
Must have been fun to work for. He was a firm believer in working hard and being professional, but that actors needed to have rights and be respected as well. Broadway called, and Arsenic and Old Lace reinvigorated his sagging career. Because of his commitment to the stage play, he missed out on being in the film version as well as the remake of Phantom of the Opera, and that one went to Claude Rains instead.
And that was a joke in Arsenic and Old Lace that was written for him, where the gangster character that he's playing
Had plastic surgery.
they screwed up his plastic surgery, and he looks like Boris Karloff now. And
I
he's- and
look
that's-
like Boris
That's part of the
Karloff.
reason he's so bitter and angry, and it's actually Boris Karloff.
Playing a guy who looks like Boris Karloff.
Yeah.
All right, so after World War II, horror movies in general kind of dried up for a while, so he went back to Broadway and continued working there. Eventually, he got another revival with TV and the shock theater films of the 50s. You've heard of the Shock Theater films, haven't you,
I
Kevin?
have heard of the. There's
Where
even
would you learn
books.
more about
There's
that?
even books about those. Would you believe it?
Yeah.
Written by
Go
our
to
own Brian Shell.
HorrorGuys.com/books. Shameless plug, shameless plug. The Horror Guy's Guide to Shock Theater. And yeah, there's a lot of Karloff movies in those.
Yeah.
And The Son of Shock, which also has a book, hint, hint, has a lot of Karloff in there too. Not all of them, though. Someday we're going to do a Boris Karloff book, but not yet. Someday.
Soon.
I don't know soon. He's down on my list. Well, this led directly to the TV anthology series called Thriller from 1960s, which eventually led to his collaborations with Roger Corman toward the end of his career. Yeah, he was pretty old when he was doing those Corman films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember when he was doing the Raven, he had to sit down a lot. He had trouble going up and down the stairs. He was maybe, I'm not going to say too old, but he wasn't real active.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's fine. It does, in fact, talk quite a lot about Karloff's film career, especially his early stuff, but there's not a lot of real surprises here. It feels thoroughly by the book as far as biographies go, but there's nothing especially standout in any of it. Granted, we've seen all these movies, so there wasn't much about Karloff that we hadn't already known, but I thought it was just kind of unexciting.
Well, like I said, it'd be a lot more so if you didn't already know most of this stuff.
Okay.
And hadn't seen most of these movies already.
Yeah, it's probably better for someone who is not already an expert on Karloff, but I won't say that for a fact. It just felt a little uninspired to me. All right, what do we got up next?
Woodlands, Darkened Days Bewitched. A history of folk horror.
Also from 2021.
Yeah, newish. Very newish.
Written and directed by Kier-La Janice, and she's interviewed along with a bunch of other people in this movie. Mm-hmm. Stars Kevin Kolsch, Dennis Widmeyer, Piers Haggard, and a whole lot of other people get interviewed. This one is probably notable because it's long.
3 hours, 14-minute runtime.
Yeah, it's really. I'm surprised they didn't break this up into like a little mini series
and
or
they
something.
cram a lot into it.
Yeah, they do.
And it's got some cool animations, and it's very watchable. And
Oh yeah. For being so long, I was totally entertained throughout.
yeah, very much so.
Well, and I made a long list of things to watch that we haven't
Yeah,
seen.
we did. And somebody, did you link to the complete list that's out there?
It's in the review. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. There's a
Somebody
complete
made a
list of all the movies, and there's a lot of them that are mentioned.
Well, after a very cool credit sequence, the film begins by asking, what is folk horror? Folk horror asks, what if the old ways were right? It's a back to the land kind of thing, other people say. And they continue to explain it and detail it throughout.
Yeah, the pagan beliefs, the earth powers, the old gods, all that sort of thing kind of grouped together.
Earthy, old, pagan-y kind of things, yeah.
The original people's magic, and
Although the term folk horror was first used way back in the 1930s, there were 3 especially influential films that get singled out here. Witchfinder General, Vincent Price, way back in the day. Mm-hmm. Blood on Satan's Claw, which is on our to-watch list. We're going to see that one real soon now.
Uh-huh.
And The Wicker Man.
Which we did see.
A couple weeks ago,
Recently
yes.
reviewed. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all about clashing belief systems and the corruption of the establishment. Paganism has a habit of surviving. We then move into the literary arena with M.R. James and his works. Whistle and I'll Come to You and The Stalls of Barchester are discussed. And I've not read either of those. Have you?
No, I haven't.
I think the only thing from him I've read is Turn of the Screw. Psychomania and a dozen other films of the early 70s are discussed as part of the Back to the Land movement. Even something like Quatermass in the Pit and Nigel Neal's work on Doctor Who gets included here. This section speaks almost exclusively on British films. And it's broken up into chapters. Chapter 1 was What is Folk Horror? Chapter 2 is, I'm going to call it British Horror, because it's really what they get into. Part 3 discusses paganism and witchcraft, as well as feminism and women's power. Witchcraft is the only religion that the UK has ever given to the world, one woman said. The Wicker Man and The Witch from 2015 are discussed here, along with many others. Because of the Salem witch trials, the U.S. comes into the witchcraft discussion at this point. The topic was used in films all the way back to 1922's silent film, Haxan.
We saw that one.
Where would you read our review of Haxan, do you think?
On the Horror Guys website.
No.
No?
It's in the Silent Age book. HorrorGuys.com/books. Horror Guys Guide to the Silent Age of Horror Film.
You worked that in so subtly.
I love these documentaries. They've got all these things that we can link to. Well, the next chapter is all about American folklore. Native American/indigenous peoples' mythologies are a great place to start. Films like Pet Sematary from 1989 is mentioned, as well as Grimm's Prairie Tales, which I have seen. It is ridiculous. It's funny. And even The Shining. Lovecraft and New England rural settings come into play here. Shirley Jackson's The Lottery is a great example. They talk about utopianism, cults, and communal living from the 70s, which were a big influence on a lot of these films, even up to things like Midsummer and Children of the Corn.
And one thing they touch on with paganism and these old beliefs and living on, and the organized church tries to blot them out like playing bop-a-mole, but they keep popping up. But because they're so easily accessible to everyone, to the country folk, to the simple folk, they don't have to, it's just an everyday kind of thing. Don't have to get all dressed up and go to church on Sunday, and it's not some elitist priest up front yakking at you, and that it's more of a common people kind of thing.
Yeah, sacrificing strangers every couple of years. You're
well,
in good
okay,
shape.
that's kind of extreme, but just every day, the harvest and the seasons, and the day-to-day living of simple people.
Yeah. And then, of course, voodoo and slave history is also discussed as a particularly American invention, all the way up to films like Candyman, which are modern interpretations of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Part 5 is about horror around the world. This kind of felt a little tacked on to me. They didn't have that much. Australia comes first with Lake Mungo and Wolf Creek, among others. Israel and Poland get Demon from 2015. Venezuela gets La Llorona, which we did review not too long ago. That's the Venezuelan version.
Uh-huh.
Russian had V, and Japan had Kwaidan and Noroi the Curse. Hey, we reviewed all these somewhere on the site.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Films from Africa, Brazil, France, Germany, Mexico, Iceland, and many other places are discussed. The final part, Part 6, is about the folk horror revival, which I don't know that that's really even a thing. Did it ever stop?
I don't think it ever really stopped.
There
No.
are newer films such as Wakewood, Midsummer, Pyewacket, The Ritual, and The Witch are discussed at this point. Yeah, they're still making them. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, well, people keep liking them, so they'll keep
Yeah.
making them. Yeah.
Well, this documentary discusses an overwhelming number of movies, a large number of which I'd never even heard of before, much less actually seen. But I did find a list, so hope is not lost. Someday we'll get to them all.
Someday.
Yeah, and that list is linked in the show notes. It's a very, very long film of over 3 hours. It's super in-depth and very well researched. There's a ton of information here. This is definitely not a fluff documentary. It's smart. The Boris Karloff one I would almost call fluff.
Yeah, almost,
It's pure entertainment.
And
this
they
one
don't-
you'll learn something
And
from.
they don't analyze and talk about, the beliefs and the, philosophies and various things. Yeah.
This one does.
Compared to Karloff, yeah, very much so.
It's smart and has lots of connections about concepts and films that I hadn't considered before.
Mm-hmm.
Between film clips and interviews, there are several fun animated segments that are used between the chapters of the documentary. So set aside a few hours for this one, or maybe even a couple of days, but it's really good. Definitely worth checking out. All right. Hey, we watched a short film this week?
We did. We watched The Rapunzel Horror,
Oh, my.
a brand new one from 2022.
And I've noticed it's also sometimes called the Rapunzel Doll. So, yeah. There's a link in the show notes if you want to watch the whole thing. It's not a trailer, it's the whole video.
Yep, it's on YouTube, a 9-minute runtime.
Written and directed by Alexander Henderson, stars Jess Adams and John Allen Holbert. It's 9 minutes long.
That's all.
Unlike that long documentary, this is not a huge investment. So what happens?
Well, it's a sort of a found footage story. It shows a man being called to document Annalisa's experiences with something called a Rapunzel doll. She's a little strange.
Boy, is she strange.
Yeah, she has called him to document it, and he's obliged. He shows up with his camera, and she literally has a doll from the Rapunzel movie. and she says it has an evil look in its eyes.
And at this point, we're pretty much convinced that she's crazy.
Yeah, until the doll moves its head on its own and things like that. Yeah. Well, we definitely get the impression, but that she isn't there. But she says, "I'm not crazy, you know." And we have doubts until
They always
the
say
doll,
that, don't they?
Until the doll starts acting up. Yeah. The commentary says it's definitely well done. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Going into this obviously crazy woman's house and watching her freak out is bad enough, but then seeing Rapunzel, well, that's a whole nother level. And it's definitely worth the 9 minutes.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, this was a really good one.
Fun short. All right, and then we move on to an older classic, Mill of the Stone Women from 1960. Written or directed by Giorgio Ferroni. Written by Remigio Del Grosso, stars Pierre Brice, Scylla Gable, and Wolfgang Price. Hour and 36 minutes. Trailer in the show notes.
An international film.
It was Italian, filmed in Spain or something like that. It's some mixed European thing. It was subtitled, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
The version we saw was. I know there's a dub version out there, but we saw the subtitled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, spoiler free, he says it's a really great slow burn that looks really good. It's very bright. It's very clean. The sets, scenery, and costumes are very impressive. The acting is decent. It's slow enough, though, to maybe border on boring for the first half, but it does get there eventually and picks up to a pretty strong finish.
It was filmed in the Netherlands. That's why, with the mills and the canals and everything. This was the one.
The mill of
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
But it was like Italian language, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's very mixed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how many American movies are filmed in Europe? Lots and lots.
Yes. Yeah.
What happens?
Well, Hans von Arnemann, could that be any more Dutch? Yeah. Gets off the boat and asks where Professor Wall lives. He lives in a windmill named the Mill of the Stone Women. A sad-looking woman watches him from behind a curtain. Professor Wall is a sculptor, and we get to see lots of creepy sculptures in his studio. Arman gets to see an automated show with statues. He's got like a menagerie of...
I can't believe people would pay
Animated.
to go see that.
Yeah, it's a tourist attraction in this
Really
little town.
kind of lame, I thought.
Well, it was a different time.
Okay. Yeah. We're not clear what year this takes place, but it's
It's-
like in the 16 or 1700s or something.
It's no Disney, but it'd kind of be a little thrill for people. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Arnim. It's hard to say. It's spelled funny. Yeah. Well, it's here. He's here to write a paper for the centenary celebration. It's been 100 years since Wall's family opened the place. The tourist attraction is a tourist trap.
It is.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Wall shows him documents about the building and the history of the windmill. He only has a few days, and the last boat leaves back at 7. Lottie, one of Wall's students, knows von Arnim. Meanwhile, he gets a look at a girl that doesn't get a chance to talk to him because he's interrupted by a Dr. Bolin. And this is just one of those, oh, she's gorgeous. Who is she? And then, he gets distracted.
And
Only
she's
gets it
gone,
quick.
Of course, yes.
At the pub, Anna Lore sings a song, and Rob is her number one fan. Armin and Lottie come in and talk to Rob. Rob explains that the strange girl is Elfie. So the
A
three,
lot of names going on here. A lot of
Yeah.
characters getting introduced.
yeah, the three of them are basically school chums.
Yeah.
Arnim, Lottie, and Rob. The next morning, Elfie introduces herself to Arnim at the mill. That's where she lives. And she says, "There's always someone watching me." Well, she can't dock now, but she gives him a key to get in later into the inner sanctums of the mill. Dr. Bolin says that he's the only one that Effie can love. So, is it a daughter kind of thing? A love kind of thing? We don't know at this point.
Don't know now.
Yeah. Well, when Arnim arrives later that evening, she's in bed sleeping, and she was having an erotic dream about him, and she wants it to continue now that she's awake. They kiss and turn out the lights.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Later, Arnim tells Lottie that he loves her, and Elfie watches. Her jealousy is growing. Lottie watches Wall's show and screams in terror at the moving statues.
These statues are not scary, so there's something more going on there.
Yeah. Well, Professor Wall later explains about his family to Arnhem. Elfie is very ill with the same illness that killed her mother, and that's why Dr. Bolam is there. She doesn't realize how serious her illness is, and it's important that she doesn't feel any stress or strong emotion. Arnhem agrees to stay away from her. Arnhem tells Elfie later that he can't see her anymore, and she doesn't take it well, has an attack. As he carries her back to her room, he notices that she's dead. Well, when he goes back the next morning, she's gone. Dr. Bolam gives him a tranquilizer to calm down. Wall accuses Arnhem of killing his daughter. Okay, it is his daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elfie has already been buried in the family tomb. Wait, was that real or was it a hallucination? We don't know. Yeah. He sees a vision of himself carrying Elfie's body to bed. Arnhem goes to the crypt and opens it, and yeah, she's in there. And he wanders around a bit, finds Annalore, tied to a chair. And when he looks again, she's gone. So he's kind of tripping and, not sure what's real at this point.
This sort of thing happens all the time in movies. How often have you looked and seen something, turned around for 2 seconds, looked back, and it was gone?
Well, he's under the influence of drugs and, emotional stress. And, he's been drugged up pretty good. He catches up with Wall, who says he doesn't remember any of this. Arnhem swears it's not his fault, but Wall says, well, his daughter's alive and fine. What are you talking about? And, sure enough, she walks down the stairs and asks what's going on, like none of this happened. Like, no, wait, you were dead. No, I'm fine.
Hello, how are you today?
Yeah. Wall says Arnhem needs to leave right away as his mental state is disrupting the household. So,
but you're dead. No, I'm not.
No,
yes,
no.
you are. No, I'm not.
Yeah, so what is going on here?
Maybe you should leave.
Yeah. Elfie hates Dr. Bolam, but he says she is bound to him. What would Arnhem say if he knew what she really was? And at this point, I was wondering, is she like a golem or something that Wall created, or some kind of puppet, living statue?
I'm just amazed at how many different ways Arnhem is spelled in this review.
Yeah, I'm noticing that. It's not helping my pronunciation. Wall tells Arnhem not to tell anyone anything, or they'll say he's crazy. Well, Wall and Bolam talk about their plan to make Arnhem how to make him think he's insane worked. A lot of it was the drugs. Wall says Arnhem will never come back, but Bolam doesn't think it's going to end that easy. He thinks he's going to come back. Well, Bolam explains that Elfie has been dying and coming back to life for 3 years. What? Arnhem could find out how they keep bringing her back to life. Well, Elfie has another attack and dies again. They wheel in Annalore, strapped to a cart, hook her up to a transfusion machine, and they give Elfie all of Annalore's blood. Elfie wakes up, and Annalore dies. Even the sores on Elfie's face fade. Bonham refuses to help dispose of the body, saying he doesn't want to make any more stone women. So that's where those lifelike statues come from. Uh-huh. Kind of a wax museum kind of vibe to it.
Yes.
Yeah, using real bodies. Yeah. Well, Wall poses Annalore's stiffening body like a statue, covers her face with a rubber mask. Bonham says he's found the ultimate blood match for Elfie, Lottie. Lottie's blood will cure Elfie forever. Well, Rob and Lottie take care of Arnhem. He proposes to Lottie. Next day, Lottie has gone missing. Arnhem spots a photo of Annalore in Lottie's apartment, and he remembers seeing her at the stone mill, and he once again believes that what he saw was real. So, yeah, he's not going away like they'd hoped. Bolam and Wall get things ready for Elfie's final operation tonight, and they carry out the new statue into the museum.
And it looks a lot like Annalore.
Amazingly like her.
Yeah. Different color wig, though.
Yeah, so nobody will recognize her.
No.
Yeah. What, Annalore vanished? Oh, and you have a new statue. What a coincidence. As they look for proof, Arnhem and Rob go back to the crypt. Elfie's crypt, of course, is empty. They do find a discarded wax statue that looks like Elfie. Aha. That's what was in the crypt the first time.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. Well, they head back to the museum, find Annalore's statue, and realize what it is. Yep. Wall and Balaam argue about Elfie marrying Balaam after the operation. Yeah. Wall's a little protective of his daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Wall stabs Balaam. Wall knows how the machines work, and he starts the blood transfusion process. But unfortunately, Balaam had the special serum in his pocket, the secret ingredient, and it broke when Wall stabbed him and he fell.
Oops.
Yeah. Well, Wall sets the lab on fire and carries Elfie out. Arnhem and Rob break in and release Lottie just in time as the fire spreads. Wall carries Elfie up into the tower, and the building burns up around them, and we watch the skin burn off the statues, revealing the skulls underneath.
Ooh.
And it's a happy ending for Lottie.
Not so much for Wall and Elfie.
No, not so much.
Yeah. So just don't die 17 times in 3 years, and it'll be fine.
Right.
Well, it's sort of like the Italian version of House of Wax, only with a little bit of mad science thrown in. And the science here, I got to say, is particularly awful.
It's, don't think about the science.
Yeah, it's entertaining. It's not scientific.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's got some very nice-looking sets. The visuals have a sort of Hammer horror vibe to them, but this was entirely made in Italy and the Netherlands. It's very slow-paced, edging almost into boring territory. It's not quite clear until about halfway through what's really going on, but it gets there eventually. I've seen this, as I mentioned before, in several lists of top horror films of all time, and I don't get it. It's fine, but there's really nothing all that impressive about it.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's all right.
It's fine.
It's not a waste of time, but it's certainly, it would not go on my top 50 list.
And next up, we had
How Sane Do You Feel?
Maniac. You maniac.
Maniac from 1980. Directed by William Lustig, written by C.A. Rosenberg and Joe Spinell, stars Joe Spinell, Carolyn Monroe, and Abigail Clayton. Hour and 27 minutes. Trailer in the show notes. Have you seen this one before?
I had not.
I have heard about it many times. I had not seen it before.
This was my first time.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah, there's no mystery or suspense here. It's just a crazy guy on a killing spree. Maybe even more horrifying because it's just a guy, not a literal monster or alien or anything. He's no Freddy Krueger, he's no Jason Voorhees, he's just Joe Spinell.
Yeah.
The gore is over-the-top practical effects, because this is all before CGI. Joe Spinell gives a great performance. It's unsettling to watch, and overall, very good.
Mm-hmm.
You liked it?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, the film is grainy. It's getting a little dated looking.
And
but it's really well done.
And he was perfect in the role. And, his ability to maintain a normalcy, when he's out in public, and to actually be downright charming when he's, dating some of the people and, interacting with some of the people, and yet utterly bonkers at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was very skillful in the role, I thought.
I thought so too, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a man watches through binoculars at a couple sleeping on the beach. The boyfriend gets up to get firewood, and the stalker guy goes over to the girl and cuts her throat. When the boyfriend returns, he gets it too. Frank Zito then wakes up. It was all just a dream, right? No, he's got a bedroom full of dolls, and he touches his scars in the mirror as credits roll. Okay, so he's already killed 2 people before the credits even.
Yeah, and he's self-harming and saving body parts. And
Yeah. In downtown New York City, the prostitutes have a discussion about making the rent. Frank picks up a hooker, and just for trivia, it's $25 for basic, $50 for French, $75 all the way, or $100 for the ultimate, just in case you were curious about the 80s. They go to a cheap motel.
I feel like
he gets the ultimate, doesn't he?
I feel like, yes, but I feel like there's not enough details there. What exactly is the ultimate?
What do you want, a menu?
Yes. Yeah. An ingredient list. Yeah.
Things are going well until he just strangles her out of the blue. He then cries and says that he didn't want to do that, and then he scalps her. What?
Yeah.
Yeah. We see that at home, Frank has an old mannequin that has a real scalp stuck to its head. Tonight, he brings home a new mannequin and puts the fresh scalp on it. Frank then loads a shotgun into a violin case and goes out again. He follows a young couple out to an isolated spot where they park to make out. The two get in the back seat, and we see Frank watching through the window. The girl then spots Frank also, and when they start the car to leave, Frank shoots the car with the shotgun right through the windshield, and we get to see his head explode
graphically.
everywhere. Frank then tells the mannequin that he can't go outside for even a minute or something like that happens. Every darn time.
You can't take you anywhere.
He admires the new mannequins in the shop windows, and that night he stalks a nurse through the streets and the subway. She hides in the restroom, but Frank eventually tracks her down and gets her just when she thinks she's escaped. Anna, a female photographer in the park, takes a photo of Frank, and he goes over to her house to talk about it. He then takes her out on a real date that she survives.
Yeah, and this is the charming part.
She explains that her
Seems
model...
downright likable.
Yeah. She explains that her model, Rita, is coming over later for some work, so they agree to meet again tomorrow night. Frank then follows Rita the model home that night and gets inside her apartment. He kidnaps her and takes her home. He seems to believe that she's his dead mother who finally came back to him. He plans on keeping her forever and ever, at least until he stabs her in the heart. Oops.
Short-term relationship.
He didn't mean to do that. Frank calls Anna, and they go out on a second date. On the way, they stop off at the cemetery and visit Frank's mother's grave. He gets upset and starts talking about Rita. Anna then gets scared and runs off, with Frank pursuing through the cemetery. Frank hears his mother's voice, an audio-only flashback to when she locked him in the closet when he was little. He imagines his dead mother reaching up out of the grave and grabbing him. Frank then goes home, alone. His arm is wounded from his fight with Anna, and he looks at all his bloody mannequins and watches them all come to life and pick up weapons. They tear him apart. The next morning, the police break down the door and find that Frank has stabbed himself and died.
It was all in his head.
Oh, yeah. A lot of it was all in his head.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin pointed out in the scene with the nurse that it's unlikely that the subways in New York City would ever be that deserted, even in the middle of the night.
Yeah, it's this huge underground area, and there's just nobody around except her.
The trains are running.
Yeah, the trains are running,
empty,
and it's
the
an open
subway's
station,
empty. Yeah.
just on a regular city street. And yeah, I was skeptical about that. It made for a good scene.
Yeah. Well, if the violence wasn't enough, Frank's inner monologues let us know what he's thinking at all times. Unlike a lot of serial killers in film, we can see that he's really got a sick mind, a real mental illness. He's not exactly evil. He's literally and obviously just insane. Frank's growling, moaning, and heavy breathing. I mean, a lot of time he just walks down the street.
Yep.
Also lends support to him being all inside his head. The gore effects are way over the top with this one.
This was some Savini work.
Tom Savini.
Tom Savini's.
He was the guy in the car that got his head blown off, by the way. Tom Savini. Yeah.
Louis.
Supposedly, film reviewer Gene Siskel got up and walked out of the movie theater when he saw that scene. It was a little too much for old Gene. This was a super influential film with excessive violence and a sympathetic point of view of the maniac. It holds up just fine today, but many of these things have been copied or duplicated elsewhere, so it may not seem too original today. But a lot of the content of the film was really shocking and innovative back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely recommend it. It's a classic.
Yes.
And that's our show for this week. What do we got next week?
We got Scream Week. Ah!
Scream 1 through 4, and also Scream 2022. Why they didn't call that one Scream 5, I don't know.
Rebooting it, I guess.
But we're going to watch the entire Scream franchise and talk about that in the podcast.
And bonus screams of
if you are on
Scream,
the
Blackula,
mailing list, go to horrorbulletin.com and sign up if you're not. It's free. Every week you get our printed emails, or our printed reviews in one email, and our bonus reviews in a second email.
And you're eligible to win stuff.
And you got a good chance of winning something next week, yes. We got multiple copies of Scream to give away, And we're going to clear out our backlog of leftover unclaimed prizes as well. Well, I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
And we'll see you when?
Next week.
See ya.
See ya.